welcome to another edition of Tampa Bay Insiders, where you get a chance to meet some of the folks that help us with the moving and shaking that goes on in the Tampa Bay area. Today we have with us Pat Frank, who is the clerk of the Circuit Court, and I'd like to welcome Pat. Thank you for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We're going to get right into it. Pat, you're not a native of Florida, are you?
Well, I've lived here more than most people have, but
Okay.
I'm not. I technically am not a native. I moved here when I was about 6.
Okay, and that's pretty early into the state of Florida. Tell us a little bit about your background. Where'd you go to school? What were you studying? What'd you want to be when you grew up?
Well, my family moved to Fort Lauderdale, and we were in Fort Lauderdale during the winter time, and then in the summertime we lived in Cleveland. And so part of my early education was abbreviated between the North and the South. I had to experience the difference between the Southern and Northern educational systems, and that made quite an impression upon me. Because,
Did you actually see it even as a young person?
I did, because I had to repeat things.
You had to repeat things when you went into this back into Florida?
What happened was it was we were ahead in the North, and then I'd have to catch up. You know, in the South they'd start teaching me what I'd already learned in the North, and then I'd be behind when I went North the next time. So it was a bit of a test.
That's something.
And
It probably played something into that school board thing, which we'll find out later on. So, you went to college here in Florida, did you not?
I did.
Okay, and you were studying?
Well, I majored in finance and taxation and minored in economics.
Okay, and then how'd you end up in D.C.?
After graduation from the University of Florida, I went to, I worked for my father for a while. He had an orange grove, and I took care of all of his accounting, and I didn't like that. I think it was just too close to the family. So I decided I'd strike out on my own. So I went to Washington, where my sister lived, with my aunt. My mother had died when I was 2, and my aunt raised my sister from that point on. So we had never lived together, but it gave me an opportunity to be reunited with her, which was good.
Big age difference between you?
Just 2 years.
Oh, okay. That must have been difficult.
And it was something that I always told my husband, if anything happened to me, the one thing I said to him was keep the children together. Yeah.
But they used to do different things back then.
Right.
They used to split everybody up and make sure that the children weren't a burden on one
Well,
single person.
and my father was a very busy man too, because he had a company of his own, and he was on the road a lot, and it was hard on him, even with one child, and it would have been more difficult, but would have probably been easier on us.
Yeah. So you got to spend time with your sister while you were up in D.C.? Mm-hmm. That's great.
And then I started looking around for a job and got a government job as an economist with the Justice Department in the antitrust section.
Wow.
It was very interesting, very
You're
interesting.
making like a full circle in a way. Well, all right, let's go. So, okay, so then you were working for the government. All right. And then you went to school. You went back to school?
Then I decided that I wanted to go to law school. So I had gone to a Catholic high school, and I'd heard about Georgetown University. So I just went down to Georgetown, knocked on the door, and said I wanted to go to law school there. But I didn't know they didn't have any women. So
Were they surprised to see you, I take it?
I think they were, in retrospect.
Okay,
I think they were very surprised.
Who is this woman, and is she trying to make a statement? Is that
Or
something like
is
that?
this a joke? But I did meet the person who was in charge of the law school, Father Lucy, and we had a very nice conversation.
This is
And-
the 50s now, right? About
50s. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And you didn't have LSATs, thank goodness. I don't think I could have handled that today.
Oh, well, that's a good thing. Okay.
So you got in based upon your grades in
college.
Yeah, in college and high school. And I think the fact that I went to a Catholic school influenced them some too.
So you ended up being the first woman admitted to the law school, to the
Yes,
Georgetown
I was there all
Law
by
School.
myself.
Well, that must have been very interesting for you.
It
You
was
had-
very interesting.
Okay. I'll bet you had no problem getting a few dates, huh?
Actually, it was more difficult than you would think because I think everybody was afraid. And so this fellow sitting next to me said to me one day, he said, "How would you like to go out and study and drink beer?" And I said, "Sure, good idea." And he said, "Well, get a date and come along."
That was not Dick, was it?
It was. It was my
Oh,
husband.
oh my God.
My husband now at 56 years.
Was that his idea of a joke right then, or what? He was just afraid you'd say no?
I think it was his way of being defensive, you know. He just wanted
Just in
to,
case, all right,
yeah.
okay.
So we did go out, and the rest is history.
A husband of 56 years, and that's how he started off, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Charming.
All right, yes, all right. So you did, but you ended up leaving Georgetown, I guess, when he was older and left sooner, or?
Actually, I was still working.
Okay.
I was an economist at the Justice Department, as I said, and I was going to school at night.
Oh, okay.
He was going full-time during the day and taking classes at night also. And it was really tough because I used to leave work, drive all the way out to where my aunt's house was, change clothes, come back down to the, go to the law school, and then go to the Justice Department, to the library section, and study until about 2 o'clock in the morning. Then go back home, grab a couple of hours of sleep, and start all over again. So it was not a dreamy sort of existence. And I started looking around, and I thought to myself, well, after I go through all this agony, what am I going to do? Because there were no women lawyers. There was nobody. And I could only see the future of working for the government or being in a back room somewhere, or being, as Ruth Ginsburg, I think she said that she had to be a secretary when she got out of law school because no one would hire a woman as a lawyer.
Those days were secretary, teacher, nurse.
Yeah,
right?
and she came after me. So I really,
oh my goodness.
I really thought this may not be what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, but
So you
it was
left,
a good
you
experience.
left Georgetown, and then you got married and came down to,
Well,
did you come down to Florida right away?
No, we lived in D.C. for about 10 years
Okay.
after that time.
And you continued to work for the government at that point?
No, I was riffed. It was during the Eisenhower administration, and they were cutting back government jobs.
and RIF
I
means
was
reduced in
force,
reduction?
reduction in force.
Okay.
And I wasn't a veteran, so I had no priorities. And so my job was eliminated. And so I was a stay-at-home mom after I had one of my children and then a second one. And then finally I went up to the Hill and worked for a congressman up there. When I dropped the children off at school, I'd go up to the Hill and work and then pick
Pretty
them up on
neat.
the way home.
Pretty neat. How'd you end up getting back to Florida?
Well, I think that both of us would vacation in Florida, and I think Dick liked it. And the more that time went on, the more we realized that, maybe it was better to raise the children in a different environment than the hustle and bustle.
I'm sending this tape to my son and his wife in Washington,
This is a
D.C.,
good idea. Tell them.
and explaining to them why they have to bring my grandson back down here. Okay, thank you. I had to do that. I'm sorry, folks. Okay, so you thought it would be better to raise your kids down here in Florida, and you came back down, and then you had another child down here, I take it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And so then how'd you get involved in politics?
Well, that goes back to that early time of my experience in the schooling, the early schooling. I was very conscious when I came back to Florida about, well, what are the schools going to be like? Because I didn't want to have the experience that I'd had earlier as a child. And I checked everything out. I called the Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education. I called the State Department of Education, and everybody assured me that Florida was much better than it had been, that the standards had risen and everything, not to worry. So we came down and put the children in public school, and at that point it was really indeed a very sad situation because teachers were earning just about $4,000 a year, I think it was. And there were not high standards set, and it was very difficult. The schools weren't air-conditioned, which made it hard to concentrate, hot as it could be. And so I started going to school board meetings, and every time the school board would take up an issue and I didn't like it, up I'd get on my feet and start talking. And I said, you know, I can do a better job than some of those people up there. So I ran for the school board, and that's how I got started.
And not that you won your first election.
No, I lost it.
Yeah, and you're such a wonderful example of don't give up. I always say that. Pat's a great example of don't ever give up.
Well,
because-
I like to tell children that when I have an
Yeah.
opportunity to go to a teach-in at schools, I make a point out of saying what my start was, that I lost 3 elections before I finally won one.
You lost 3 in a row?
Yes.
What made you keep going? I mean, I don't want to say everybody batteries or buddies or whatever it is, but a lot of people, you see them, they run one time and they never do it again.
Well, it is a devastating experience because it's not something that you can ignore. You know, it's all over the papers that you're a failure at something. And so it's hard for some people to face that. But you know, I never looked at it that way because I wanted to do it so badly that overcame any pride that I had. It also taught me the lesson that, you know, you don't always win in politics, and
Or in
take
life.
in life, absolutely. But take every person and value them, respect them. When they have something to say to you, don't ignore it. You know, when you're on the campaign trail, and I see this now, you know, that there are articles written about one of the presidential candidates who seems to be consumed with himself. And rather than thinking about the people, he's thinking about selling himself. And I think that's the wrong way to approach the public when you're seeking public office, because you have to be thinking about them, not about you. And if you do that, and you do fail, and you really want the job, you go back and do it again. It's no big deal.
It's no big deal. But again, it's a big deal for a lot of people, and it is inspiring to know that there are some folks who are not going to give up, and you're one of them. So you had a few years on the school board. How many was that?
4.
4 years, and then you moved on to?
The House of Representatives, State House.
And what did you do while you were up there? I know that you were awarded a couple of really
Yeah.
important honors there.
Well, I maintained my interest in public education, and it concerned me greatly because I'd sat on the school board during the time that integration occurred, and I knew the disparity between the black and white schools. And I felt that it was grossly unfair to pass a requirement that all students pass a functional literacy test before they get their diploma without recognizing that some of these children had been handicapped by the circumstances they were put in. So I got a program passed that gave compensatory education to students to be able to get their skills honed so that they could pass the functional literacy test. And it was a $20 million program, which was rather unheard of for a freshman to get something through that easily. So my colleagues voted me the most effective freshman legislator.
What a great compliment, and being a freshman person, too. Pat, you were in the State House for one term,
Right.
and then ran for State Senate in Florida,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
Tell me about that. You spent, what, 1 or 2 terms as a senator?
Actually, because of reapportionment, there was a shorter term that required that all senators had to run, and then there was a truncation halfway of the term. So I was in there for 10 years in the Senate.
Okay, so like 2.5 terms, in other words.
Yeah.
So what do you, I know that one of the most important things that, well, at least I think that you did while you were there was work on growth management, such
Yes.
a big deal in the state of Florida. I don't know how you could summarize that in a minute, but could you, the importance of that? Because I think a lot of people always, how does Florida seem so sometimes out of whack with so many people coming in?
Well, we saw a lack of planning throughout the state. We saw some counties that were very good at it, and Sarasota County was actually a model. And other counties, which they just haphazardly approved zoning and planning. And so this was supposed to be a statewide framework for how do you want the state to be when it grows up.
And in summary, that law states that when you're building, what has to happen?
The idea was that the infrastructure has to be paid for by the development, and it has to be built concurrent with the structures that are going to be new, you know, the
Water?
the housing and, yeah, everything.
Well,
The
when you say
roads,
infrastructure, what you're talking about is
roads,
water, sewer, roads.
transportation, everything.
Do you think we have followed that, or has that been sort of not always?
Well, the act has been changed since it was passed, and that's one thing. I think it's been weakened. We also had regional planning councils that had a significant role to play, and they've been watered down in terms of their authority, so that you couldn't, for instance, one county could make certain that all the road structures were in place, but the minute that that traffic went out of that county and into another county, the roads would be terrible. So regional planning was important, but I think that's fallen by the wayside. The other thing is that it wasn't a mandate on counties. It was a suggestion to them. They had to come up with plans. And if they didn't come up with the plans, they'd lose some of their revenue sharing money from the state, which I did put in, and that was not easy to do. But the problem is the plans could be rather poor, and they could just minimally meet the standards of the state. It was our hope that this would be a wake-up call for counties, and that they would take it seriously and really let the lever drop in terms of willy-nilly construction and a lack of infrastructure.
Well, we probably still need some more work on that, but I'm going to go back to you for a second. I know you probably will cover that again, but after being in the Senate for 10 years, you took a little break, right? And then you got local again, correct?
Well, actually, I ran for several offices in the interim.
Okay.
And those I lost.
Okay.
One I lost, and one I stepped aside from. The first race was stepping aside from a U.S. Senate race. Well, I lost that one. It was actually the one that was stepping aside was when I was running for lieutenant governor. So I had 3 races.
Okay, okay. And then I think I remember that you were involved with Tampa General and got
Yes.
pretty ticked off about the hospital going private. There it
Yes,
is,
and
by the way, on the headlines this
and
morning,
I-
and not too good either.
And it was a source of conversation at my kitchen table this morning when I said this never would have happened if it had remained public.
Okay, right. I was wondering that. I saw that and said, oh boy, and I'm having Pat on today. Okay, so you saw what happened there and were disenchanted with the way that Tampa General went and decided to run for county commission.
Yes, I was on the board of the hospital authority, and I was very vocal about some of the things that I thought that were wrong, and I did not want the hospital to go private. I was no shrinking violet about expressing my views on that. And as a result of that, the commission, which makes the appointments, refused to reappoint me. And they rarely do that, you know, that they don't appoint somebody who asks to be reappointed. So when I was rejected by the commission, I said, okay, I'm just going to run for the commission.
And I think most of us are all thankful that you did that. And that wasn't the only issue, though.
No, it wasn't the only one.
Wasn't the only issue. It might have been that stadium tax and a few other things that
Yes, yes.
and clean up our river and get a few other things done that weren't happening. But so we were very fortunate to have you be on the commission for the period that you were on, and I think you're the first person to ever be chair for 3 years in a row, were you not?
Not the first person, but the first person in about 20 years,
Okay.
since Ellsworth Simmons had been chairman.
Okay.
And-
I didn't know
and-
there was somebody before you.
And also, he was, I think it was a one-party board at that time. When I was chairman, At first it was a majority Democrats, then it became a majority of Republicans, and so I was elected in both circumstances chairman for 3 years, 3
No,
terms.
you certainly always had the backing of both parties and independents and a lot of different people.
I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, and I think we're all proud of you for bringing us together on a great many issues. But then you saw another opportunity to use some of that early education and your background and everything, and I know that a lot of people don't understand what your job is because the word clerk is sort of vague in a way, you
it
know,
is.
so what do you do, take notes? But anyway,
File.
what does a clerk of the circuit court do, as briefly as you can say? 'Cause I know it's a lot.
It's the official record keeper for the courts to begin with.
Okay.
And if you think we have 61 judges and hundreds of thousands of cases, and you've got to keep all those records, and you have to keep them for a required amount of time, and then they can be destroyed. Others you have to keep forever, juvenile records and adoption records, and you have to keep them out of the public eye. So it's an awesome job in terms of just managing all of the documentation. We actually staff the courtrooms with clerks, and we have clerks at all of the stations where the public comes in and accesses information for them so that they can take care of their business. We handle all child support, domestic violence for people. All traffic tickets go through our office.
Did I read that you performed marriages on
Yes.
Valentine's Day?
Yes, I did myself.
What was that about? That's a part of your function,
We,
too.
we issue marriage licenses. That's where you have to come to get your marriage license. And if you choose, we'll perform the ceremony for a very nominal fee, and we'll even take pictures.
Oh, and I understand on Valentine's Day you even give out roses or something,
Yes.
right? Did you do that?
I did that, and a little bit of candy. And we do that not with taxpayers' dollars.
Okay, you do it with your own money.
Yeah.
But Pat, besides that, besides the record keeping, marriage licenses, all the court, if I got a ticket, you would be letting me
Yes.
know. If I were jury service, that would come
That's
through
us.
your department
That's
as
us.
well. But aside from that, what about this financial function that you have over all the money that goes in the till in Hillsborough County, is that right?
Because it actually is the clerk of the court and the comptroller for Hillsborough County. There are two titles that the job has. Now, that's not the case in every county. In Orange County, for instance, in Orlando, the two jobs are separated, and they have two different individuals who are elected. But in our county, it's one. In most counties in Florida, it's one. And in our case, this is where my early training is very beneficial because we handle all of the county's monies. For instance, when the tax revenue comes in a month or so, we'll have that money deposited in different places, and we'll probably have about $600 million that'll come through our hands. We have to keep that money available for the county as it needs to pay payrolls or to pay for warrants, bills that it has, and we issue those warrants for the county, and we handle the payroll for all of the county
And
employees.
you invest that money so that we get a better...
We invest it.
Okay.
And part of it was invested in the State Board of Administration's fund, the SBA fund, the Florida Government Investment Fund, which had some very bad problems, not because of anything that we did, but the administration was not tight in controlling how those investments were made. And just like the housing industry, some of that money was invested in securities that were mortgage-backed. And now we're stuck with our money up there
And
frozen.
aren't we all finding that out, even with our own
Yeah.
annuities or mutual funds, that there's some money that was invested in these, and then we're losing money based on that. But you've got that all under control now.
Well, I have the majority of my funds are in a separate portfolio that we have ourselves. We manage it. The short-term monies are managed internally in my office, and then we have a company that does our long-term investments for us, a very nominal fee. And I asked for Standard & Poor's to come in and rate our portfolio. I wanted to be sure that I was doing the right thing. And I didn't know how that was going to turn out, and it was a rather nervous feeling. We got the highest rating that they issue. So I'm very pleased with that because the
That's
county's
fabulous.
money is safe.
We've only got a minute or two left, which so the time's gone pretty quickly. But I just wondered if you could comment on what you think, given all that you know, and the education, your background in that, and the county, and what you're doing there in the state, and so. What do you think are the most pressing thing that we have to deal with in Florida? Is it still growth, perhaps, or is it something else? Transportation, other things?
Well, I still, it's the economy right now, of course. Everybody's concerned about their jobs. We're going to have to be conscious about what sort of employment do we want in Florida. Is it going to be an open door policy that just gives anybody a job for the least amount of money? How are we going to encourage businesses that we want to come here? What sort of environment do we want to set for them? Obviously, it's got to be something that is attractive and easy to live in. The infrastructure is very important. Transportation is certainly a top item, and I think we should concentrate on providing bus service before we talk about expensive rail that stops at the end of the tracks, and we don't know whether there's going to be ridership to support it. But I do think the buses should be very aggressively pursued.
It looks to me like buses are going to be the big deal right now with gas being as high as it is.
It may be a blessing.
I'm really glad you could join us today and tell us some of your viewpoints on what's happening with us, and wish we could talk to you longer. We'll do that another time, I'm sure.
Well, thank
you. And thank you for the job you've done for all of us and your great public service to the community.
Well, thank you so much.
We'll see you next time.